Performance, about all the things that are affecting performance athletes in our communities, from racism, gender inequity, sex abuse and prevention, nutrition, psychology, and of course, dance medicine and science. We talk with one guest expert every week about one topic, and we dive really deep, and hopefully with the mission of expanding education and providing information and resources that you didn't have before. So thank you so much for tuning in. My partner and co-host and fabulous friend Melissa McDaniel Grisham is out today, so it will be me chatting with the fabulous Dr. Linda Bluestein of Hypermobility MD. She has been with us many times before. She's a board-certified anesthesiologist, integrative pain medicine physician, and former ballet dancer who specializes in treating and educating dancers and other athletes and individuals at increased risk of hypermobility disorder. She founded and co-hosts the podcast Bendy Bodies with Hypermobility MD, and is a former co-host of the podcast Hypermobility Happy Hour. She is the resource for all things hypermobility, just let's be honest. Dr. Bluestein has been treating individuals with complex hypermobility disorders for years, educating and coaching dancers and studio owners, as well as conducting research on dancers with hypermobility disorders. She is widely published, which we're going to share with you some of her most recent publications later today. And drawing from all these rewarding experiences, she's formulated a unique, compassionate approach to assist a greater population of those suffering with these conditions. So Dr. Bluestein, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here again. And you are a friend of the show, so we really do appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you again.
Yeah, it's fun. And today we're talking about the more is better trend, and is that hurting our young performance athletes? And that's what we're going to dive into today. It seems like we're constantly asking dancers to do more, jump higher, dance longer, dance sometimes through injury. What do you think is driving that trend?
I think that we are living in the age of excess. I think we're living in the age of extreme and of excess. And I think that people are doing more and more extreme things in order to get attention. And I think that, I think it's just a sign of the times.
Do you think that, let's be honest, social media has to play a huge part of that, because before we couldn't see everybody else's achievements so blatantly online. Now kids can look and they're finding other kids. And everybody's putting their best out there. We're not showing our worst, we're showing our very best. And everybody's constantly trying to, whether they admit it or not, top that, right? So you think that's a driving force?
Excuse me. I think it's that. And I think the other thing is social media is so filtered, like you just said. But what happens is I happen to know a lot of people who, for example, are on Instagram and doing all kinds of crazy things, but they actually can't dance. So they are able to do various different tricks and things, but they're not able to dance. And so it's, to me, really such an important thing to be talking about, because dancers, we work so hard. We want to please the teacher, the choreographer, the artistic director. We want to please everybody. And so we sometimes forget to actually listen to our own bodies and pay attention to ourselves.
Yeah. That's a good point. So dancers are high level athletes, and they obviously push themselves as well. It's not just social media. It's not just their teachers. They have a drive that doesn't quit, and they push themselves. So when do you know it's just too much? And what are those key indicators? What are the red flags that go, just stop?
Right. So the interesting thing about the body is it will keep screaming louder and louder at you until you actually listen.
I've learned that the hard way.
Yeah. A lot of us have learned that the hard way, right?
Yeah.
So, and then what happens sometimes is we develop secondary problems, and some of those can be anxiety and disordered sleep and all these other things. And then we can interpret the signals the wrong way. So I feel like in general, dancers, when we're dancing, when we're younger, when we're doing well, we don't incorporate the information that our body is trying to tell us. And that's the way I like to look at it. It is information. Don't panic. Right. Your body is giving you information. This is important. It is your job as the brain part of the body to listen to the information that your body is trying to tell you and to decide what is my body asking for right now? Is my body asking for more sleep? Is my body asking for more nutrients? Is my body asking for rest? What is it that I need to give my body right now? Because you don't want to get into the situation where it's screaming louder, louder, louder. And I've been at dance competitions before where I have seen kids come out with an injury, crying, tears, put on the ice it for a little while, and then go right back in. And it's
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh, no, 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 no. Like you probably really did just injure yourself, or else it would not have
Right.
had, because you can't really feel things while you're doing the activity.
Sure.
Let's just face it, you really don't have that much awareness. But if it was that profound that you actually came out of the class or the studio or the theater or whatever, and you went out when you were putting ice on it, it is the wrong thing to ice that body part until it's numb. You can't
Right.
feel it anymore. Now it doesn't hurt anymore, and go right back in, because that cold tissue is going to break. And what we want to avoid is bodies breaking down. We are pushing ourselves so hard that bodies are breaking down. And if we pay attention sooner, and if we think of the long game, that's the other thing, is I really, really want dancers to be thinking, of course, of your own personal goals. But I would hope that one of
Right.
your personal goals is to be to have a long, healthy career, and be able to walk and maybe even
Sure.
dance in a different
Yeah.
capacity, right? After your career is over.
Yeah, and for some, especially as we're seeing kids that are injured younger and younger, it really does impact them for the rest of their life. And
Yeah.
many of them don't want to, I mean, they don't want to dance past high school, but yet they're stuck with this painful injury or this painful reminder of their time spent dancing and something that should have been fun and lovely and wonderful and healthy and amazing. It affects them for the rest of their life. And so this brings me to the next question. Whose ultimate responsibility is it to hit that pause button? Is it the coach and the teacher? Is it the dancer and the student? Is it the parent in the case of younger performance athletes or minors? Whose responsibility is it? Or is it D, all of the above?
I would say it is D, all of the above, but I would say the most important thing is for parents to choose the studio that they send their children to, and
Mm,
for adult dancers to choose their teachers and their studio very, very carefully,
yeah.
and to really look at what's the culture like. What is the what kind of subtle messages are you getting at that studio? Are they encouraging you to really, take care of yourself and do the right things? And if they have choreography that's a little, sketchy, are they listening to the dancers when the dancers say, that really hurts my body? Can we look at, another alternative? And obviously it depends, right? I mean, if you're a very, very young dancer, you're, first of all, not going to probably
Sure.
be able to speak up and say that. And secondly, you probably don't have the power to change anything.
Right.
But parents need to know what kind of school they're sending their child to. And they really should be doing some pretty deep investigative work, I think, because that makes all the difference in the world. You want a really, really healthy culture. And I think most dance educators, they want to do the right thing for their students, but they're not all equally
Yeah,
informed. And so
that's
you
right.
want to go to a place where, their priority is not necessarily the same as other places. You want to go someplace where the priority is the dancer themselves, that each and every one of those dancers.
They're prioritizing the dancer before the dance, and
Yes.
that's the primary goal. And a lot of parents out there may not know, you can request if you plan ahead. Sometimes there's the certain situation where you don't know that you're going to make the switch, or maybe you just decided your child is going to dance, but for the most part, that's a decision that's made in advance. You can look at the recital for that studio and go be a spectator and an audience member and watch the recital to really get an idea. look at it, go to a competition, a local competition, and see who's there and what they're about, how they interact with the parents and the students. You can see a lot of that in a very short amount of time, but also you can ask for a meeting with the director, get to know who that director is, what the policies are before they have the big parent meeting. Ask for a one-on-one so you can get your questions answered. There's lots of research that you can do on your own, as Linda said. So we definitely encourage you all to do that, especially headed into the new season if you are making that switch or you are thinking about getting into the sport, because there's a lot of nuances there for sure. If you're just joining, I am Bree Zabrowski, co-founder and CEO of Apollo Performance Wear. This is Beyond the Steps. It's a show where we talk about one topic, one question affecting dancers and other performance athletes, from racism, gender and equity, sex abuse and prevention, nutrition, psychology, and of course, dance medicine and science. I'm chatting with Dr. Linda Bluestein today. She is a longtime friend of our show, and we're talking about the more is better trend. How is that helping or hurting young performance athletes? I think we all know the answer to that, but we're diving deeper into why. So, Linda, do you think the culture of more is better is more prevalent in dance than other sports, or do you think it's happening across the board?
I think it's happening across the board. Yeah, I definitely think it's happening across the board. And I had an extensive experience in as an anesthesiologist taking care of injured athletes at all different levels. And it just blew my mind hearing sometimes the parents asking questions of the surgeon. We haven't even gone in to do the surgery yet. And when can they get back to football? And when can, and it's like, whoa, wait a second. Let's get
out of surgery.
Yeah. Let's get through the surgery, and really we want to think about the fact that we are living longer. And yes, we can replace knees, we can replace hips, but we don't want to be doing these things at a young age. So we really want to be very, very conscious of how we are treating our bodies. And just because everyone else is doing it doesn't mean that you have to do it. And if everybody starts to be a little more cognizant, pay a little bit more attention to their body, how their body is feeling, then I think we will, the whole culture will shift. And if you look at something like football, right? If you think about somebody like Tom Brady, this is not somebody who burned his body out at a young age. This is somebody who made very careful choices. Obviously has not only incredible gifts, but also had the resources to assemble an incredible team, right? An incredible team of healthcare professionals and nutritionists and all that kind of thing. But if you want a long career, then find out what did Julie Kent do. Don't be looking at these 15-year-old dancers on Instagram. Be thinking about what did these people do who did have long careers. That should be your role model.
Yeah, and the reality is that kids don't think about the long-term effects. They feel great. They haven't felt pain yet. They don't understand the long-term ramifications of choices being made. So as parents and teachers and coaches, we really have to advocate for them and really, I don't want to say force the issue, but really force the issue because they don't understand the implications on for the most part. I will say there are exceptions, but for the most part, they don't get the long-term effects of all of this. And I also want to say that yes, there are solutions out there like knee replacement surgeries and hip, but if we're talking about young people, and I mean like people into their 30s and even 40s having those things, like something went way wrong somewhere. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. And that's the scary thing, is that we are seeing more drastic injuries, more invasive surgeries at a younger age. And we really need more data about this. And there's somebody that you and I both are friends with that she and I had talked about doing an extensive study on competition dancers. And we really need this kind of data. It would be very, very helpful to have. Of course, having a baseline would have been really helpful. What did this look like 10, 20, 30 years ago? But, I definitely think that things have progressed. And I definitely think that we are having a lot more injured dancers and retired dancers at younger ages. I worked with a dancer who is retired at 16. Her mom is a dance teacher.
That's crazy. 16 retired, not in the same sentence. Shouldn't be.
Exactly. And she loves dance. I mean, she would love to still be dancing, right? Her mom is a dance educator, super amazing family. I met the dad. I was recording a course and she was the model that we used. Super great family, supportive and all of that. But she was the bendiest one in her dance studio. So she was in all the competitions front and center as the, here you're going to do all the tricks. And she was telling me she won awards. She won the Gumby Award. She won the No Bones Award. She won all these things because she could do all these tricks. And it turned out she has a actual, like, diagnosed by blood testing, because not all of the bendy disorders can be diagnosed that way, but hers was actually diagnosed. And, she even still didn't totally believe it, I think, in some ways. And I asked her to, do some of these different maneuvers, and she bent back her fifth finger. Okay. I'm old, so mine doesn't go very far, but literally her fifth finger went backwards and touched the back of her hand. Yeah, and I
No.
screamed.
Ah,
And they're like, that's a great outtake.
okay.
So there are kids who, I think if this kid was, my age, when she was
Right.
then 12, 13, 14, she would have been dancing, but she would not have pushed her body so hard that she's now in so much pain that she's retired at 16.
Wow. Wow. So that then begs the question of, how important is it for these competitions and conventions to stop rewarding stuff like that and stop acknowledging? I mean, we shouldn't be giving out the Gumby Award.
Right.
We shouldn't be giving out the Bendy Person Award, because then what is happening is that everybody else there is going to try to attain that
Right.
and achieve that and say, well, subconsciously, I want that award and I want to be looked at like that. So
Right.
that's a positive. And I don't know. I mean, how do we get past that?
And that is exactly right. And so what ends up happening too is even kids that are not naturally super flexible, they're trying to do these things and they're probably tearing ligaments and tendons, and
Yeah.
they're incurring injuries too. Just because they're not hypermobile doesn't mean that they're going to be immune from injury, of course. So I totally agree with you. I think if the competition dance community would say, hey, competition dance, great, let's do it. Let's have this be a positive thing for kids, but let's prioritize what are the things that we want most out of these competitions. We want kids to continue to love dance and fall in love with dance even more. We don't want these kids to leave these competition weekends so exhausted. And they're like, I can't do this again. I can't ever do this again.
And in so much pain,
Yes,
and
exactly. In so much pain. So I agree. I really would love to see those awards go away because it has turned into competitions of who's the bendiest, and dance is so much more than who is the bendiest, I mean, it should be artistry and expression and all of the beautiful things about dance. I mean, dance is, I'm sorry, it's the most amazing thing in the world, right? And
it's a shared language and it's meant to evoke emotion
right.
and make you think. But I do agree, there's so much more to it. But just in recent years, there's been such an emphasis on those tricks. And so I think we really, that then it's a whole nother show. But then all the organizations, the studios, that are putting that person front and center, that are, they're getting rewarded for that. We have to turn that around somehow. And that's a much longer conversation and a harder one to broach. But I do think that that's a part of it.
I think kind of like Hollywood, has incredible power. I think these big competitions have incredible power. And I would love to see the first organization that really prioritizes dancer health. And they get some of these dance. I mean, you and I know lots of the great dance medicine organizations, and they get them in there to talk to the parents and the students and provide education in a fun way, right? We don't have to make this boring. Let's make it fun. I was in the audience for the Oprah Winfrey show, and I actually got up and said something. And after the show, you could wait and you could meet her, right? So I waited and I stood in line to meet her. And I said, Oprah, you have such a large audience. I really think you should have more healthcare professionals on the show because you have this incredible opportunity. They had an episode once on snoring, and they never talked about sleep apnea. And I said, I really want to see you talk about things that that you'll really be saving lives. You truly could save lives.
Yeah.
And she said, we've tried that, but they were so boring. And I said to her, I said, then you haven't found the right healthcare professional yet. You need to keep looking. And then we found Dr. Oz.
Yeah.
I'm like, Dr. Oz.
And it worked.
Yeah, Dr. Oz should send me
And it worked.
But you know, I think that I think people will respond. I think parents will respond. And if they see that this, you know, this, I'm putting this out there as a challenge to,
I love it.
Yeah, to competition dance, you know, owners to say, you know what, we are going to change our culture. We are going to make this about the love of dance and creating healthy dancers for a lifetime.
And it really is an all-in thing. It can't be a little toe in the water.
Right.
It has to be really an all or nothing. And I think that's where we're at. We have a lot of toes being dipped in the water, and it's good because it's a baby step and it's indicating that we're aware, right, that this is an issue, but it's not enough. We need to be fully submerged, fully immersed in the commitment of it. And you know, it's I hate to say it, but it's also that money trail too.
Right.
I mean, people, you don't want to upset the money trail and the studios that are paying big dollars to go to those things, and dollars talk. And we know that. Right. So
that is very true. That is very true. However, if we work on prioritizing dancer health, we will have more dancers dancing longer. That's and right. Therefore there will be more money in the industry. So I really don't think it's an either or, but I agree 1,000% about the toe in the water thing. And just, you know,
just rip the Band-Aid off. Yes, exactly. Somebody do it already.
Yeah, exactly. I worked at a hospital who they had a program. They brought somebody in to talk about physician burnout. And it was such a little like token thing that they did. And they weren't really passionate about helping their physicians. And I think, you know, you're 100% right. Do it and do it.
You can tell the difference, right? Like, you know, when somebody's really behind it and when it's just checking a box. And I definitely agree. We need to walk the walk or dance the steps, whatever you want to call it, but that needs to happen. If you're just joining, I agree with Paula. This is Beyond the Steps, and we are chatting with Dr. Linda Bluestein today about the more is better trend, and is it hurting our young performance athletes? And I think the unequivocal consensus today is yes, it is. So Linda, I feel like we've opened Pandora's box on this trend, and I don't know that we can close it easily, right? Of the more is better mentality. Do you think the industry can make a turn in a safer direction? And what do you think it will take to accomplish that? I guess we've already answered that with like rip the Band-Aid off, right? But specifically, you know, what steps are the most important to take in your mind? Is it the scoring? Is it just the overall culture of the event and dancing less hours and floors and all the things? Like, what is it?
I think all of those things that you mentioned are really, really great. And also mental health, because we are seeing more and more kids struggling with their mental health. And of course, you know, I think it's such an unfortunate combination of things, because, you know, we had all the social media has wonderful aspects to it. No doubt about it. It allows you to connect with people that you never would have connected with otherwise. However, it can also be detrimental to your mental health. And it's really important to dose social media appropriately. And I feel like we have seen effects on mental health with social media, with phones being so readily available. You know, I feel like people can't focus anymore at all, because the second we get bored, we pick up our phone. Me too, me included. Yeah, exactly. But I feel like we were already in this phase where that was taking a turn for the worse in terms of anxiety and things like that. And then you add on top of that the pandemic and, you know, all the uncertainties that go along with that, right? So I feel like we need to prioritize physical and mental health. And, and, you know, there are people that are doing some wonderful things in that regard. And I think that we need to be working together. That's the other thing is I would love to see organizations, you know, working together more because at the end of the day, we should all be putting the dancer first. Like you said, the dancer before the dance.
And it's hard because there are so many pockets in
Right.
this industry of people with the best of intentions doing fantastic work, and you would never know about them unless you're really immersed in it yourself, because everybody's kind of all spread out doing it in their own way, in their own time, because there is really no governing body. There's people that have definitely stepped up to the plate to try it, but it's not been well received yet. And so I think that all of us, need to continue to join forces as well. And going back to the social media comment, it's interesting because I just read something that was, social media is a force for good in some ways. It bolsters creativity for kids, but don't be the person consuming the content, being the person creating it, and letting your brain be stimulated by creating and putting out wonderful art and movement and things that inspire people, but don't be the one consuming it, because that's where the danger is when you're consuming versus creating. So I think that's is it social media totally avoidable? I mean, I can tell you, I'm going to keep that off the table with my kids as long as I possibly can, as long as I'm going to fight that fight as hard as I can. And my husband's on the same page, but I know that we're not going to be able to avoid it forever. And so, maybe that's a good guideline: consume or create, don't consume, you know? So, so knowing that many performance athletes, specifically dancers, are not going to take a step back for fear of not advancing. I mean, that's the reality, right?
Right.
Like, we're all going to say, step back, all the things, but at the end of the day, they want to dance. They don't want to not get to the next level.
Right.
They're competitive, right? Losing their spot, they don't want to do that. They want to win. Are there small to moderate changes or practices that they can put in place to mitigate risk? And now we're talking about the performance athletes themselves.
Right, right. So I would liken it to football players and traumatic brain injury.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
if you are a football player and you have never heard of traumatic brain injury, there is a huge problem. You need to be informed. And of course, like you said, when they're younger, it's the parents, but then at some point it becomes your own decision, right? And it's
Sure.
not like magically on your 18th birthday. Hopefully, dancers and athletes are being involved in these decisions long before that 18th birthday. But in the exact same way that we need for football players to make an informed decision about playing football and risks of traumatic brain injury and other injuries, we need dancers to be able to do their own risk benefit analysis and really make informed decisions. I had a dancer patient once who was in her, I believe, maybe late 30s or so, and she was taking lots of adult ballet classes, and she had a regular appointment, and then she said something about going on point. And she'd never been on point before. And I said, "Oh, that's really interesting. What tell me more about that," And then in the process of discussing this, found out she actually didn't really want to go on point. It was her teacher told her that she could. And I'm like, then really think about if you want to do that.
What's not? Yeah.
Because, you're at 39 or whatever, you're not going to you're not going to join ABT, of course, so you just really want to be thinking about what making conscious choices, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And
Right.
And I would mention here the approach that I take to working with dancers and non-dancers. And most of my patients, I mean, I have patients and clients that have never danced, but a lot of them are former dancers. They're retired dancers. They were with ABT or New York City Ballet or whatever in the past, but they're not dancing anymore. Or they are, doing Cirque du Soleil and other, fascinating things. So I have an approach that I take in an acronym, and I think I shared the articles with you. But in terms of things that people can do, excuse me, a lot of us, if we go to standard Western doctors, right? We have 5 minutes, maybe 10, maybe 15, but it's not long. So if we go in there and I've had many dancers come up to me after a presentation on I'm thinking of one on gut function, and came up to me and said, "Yeah, well, I have all these problems with my digestion and bloating and abdominal pain and blah, blah, blah." And I went to the GI doctor, and they did some tests, said I was fine, and basically said I had an eating disorder. And she's like, "I want to eat. I'm trying to eat, but I have issues after I eat." So there's a lot of things that we can do, but most Western doctors are so trained to get out the prescription
Right.
pad and write for a prescription. And if they don't have a pill to fix it, then they don't necessarily know about other options. So that's why I wrote these articles to talk about.
Yep.
Now, this acronym can be applied to any condition. It doesn't have to be symptomatic joint hypermobility, but basically it's men's PMMS, and that stands for movement, education, nutrition, sleep, psychosocial modalities, medications, and supplements. Because
how do you remember that?
yeah, and I put medications and supplements at the end on purpose.
Got it.
Sleep is before supplements, and the other two M's are before. Yeah, because we need to think about all of these things. So there's so much low hanging fruit, and most doctors don't know about the low hanging fruit. So sleep, for example, if we can get dancers sleeping better, sleeping more in a more restorative fashion, and evaluating like what's going on with their sleep. Why aren't they sleeping well? Why are they awakening feeling unrefreshed? And is that part of that a nutrition problem? And, kind of really looking at the person as a whole person, because that's the other problem in our medical culture is we have these silos, right? And we don't cross. So, we need to look at people as the whole person that they are and try to address things in the best possible way so that they can also then feel better, dance better, and then also have the information to then make their own decisions and make their own risk benefit analysis. Unfortunately, we don't have the same kind of data like they have in football. We don't have the money.
Right.
We don't have the money in dance medicine that they have in football, but we're getting there. I mean, I think we're making a lot of progress.
I agree. And everything does affect everything else. So your mindset is going to affect you physically and vice versa. Right. So it is very important that we tackle all of that. And I think the other thing about medical care too is, tell me if you find this, because I was just talking about this with somebody else. Do you think that because there isn't a lot of knowledge specifically about dancers, it is a much smaller niche of people that are capable of treating dancers properly. And we have really great people that do that, but there's not a lot of them, I would say. Doctors tend to kind of lean towards research and methods that are very outdated and very, just there's no research to replace it based on our current standards. So everything is, but they're comfortable doing that because it's research and I can go back and I don't have to take accountability because there's also a lot of malpractice. There's a lot of things that doctors have to be concerned about. And so it's just easier sometimes to go to that research and say, okay, well, this is this, it says right here. And there's you're kind of offloading that accountability, right? Do you think that's a thing?
I do think that's a thing. And you're right. We need way, way more numbers. There's no doubt about that. And it is really challenging because, we don't have as much data as we really should have. It is so expensive to do a study. It is so expensive.
I know.
And so, exactly. And so time consuming, right? From the time that you start and until you actually get it published takes forever. And I'm reading a book right now by Peter Attia called Outlive, the Art and Science of Longevity. And he talks in there about evidence-informed medicine. So evidence-based medicine is, I'm going to look at all these double-blind randomized controlled trials. I'm going to read all the literature. But evidence-informed medicine is I'm going to look at all that stuff, but I'm also going to take into consideration how are my patients responding to the treatments that I'm giving them?
I love that.
And so it's, we cannot study, first of all, we cannot study everything from a practical standpoint. And why wouldn't we use still the information that we're getting in clinical practice? And, something like parachuting, we don't have any double-blind randomized controlled trial that tells us that you should use a parachute when you jump out of an airplane. But I think
we just know.
Exactly. We just know. So I think that we should be taking information from all of these sources and weighting it appropriately, right? We should be giving it the correct amount of weight for any given thing that we're trying to assess. And it's a risk benefit thing. So if I'm going to recommend to somebody to do something to improve their sleep, and it's like a behavioral type intervention, what's the risk?
Right. Right.
why would I wait for a study to show me, I'm sure you've seen these studies where you go, duh, like I cannot believe somebody
Right.
paid the money to study these things. And
Right.
yes, it's nice to
Yes.
have that data, but so
Yeah.
so I think for me, it's if I'm going to recommend a supplement, a nutritional intervention, whatever it might be, I always think about what's the risk. If I'm prescribing a medication, what's the risk? What are the risks? What are the potential benefits? And we don't have FDA approved treatment. First of all,
No.
we don't have we don't have anything, nothing, not a single thing FDA approved to treat EDS or Ehlers-Danlos syndromes, which can cause people to be
Right.
bendy or
Yeah.
hypermobile. Nothing, not a single thing. And secondly, we know that the FDA indications for medications are, yes, we prescribe things that way, but most things we prescribe off label, because what happens is a drug company will get a drug approved, but then they're not going to go back and get it approved for a whole bunch of other things. So we prescribe
Yeah.
things off label all the time. And that's an appropriate part of clinical practice. But the last thing I want to say about that is a lot of physicians, I feel like it's safer to say, stop dancing. And I don't know how many people
Yes.
listening to this.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was told when I was having joint pain and I wanted to be a professional dancer more than anything in the whole wide world. I was having all these problems and I was told, it hurts to dance. Well, then stop dancing. That's not the answer I wanted, So, yeah.
And it's avoidable if you start tackling it early and put into practice the ways that you can mitigate the risk, right? Like then you can
Right.
keep dancing. And that's not, but again, it's that lack of accountability. I don't want to be responsible for this. And I don't want, it's just easier, safer to say, just stop completely. And we don't need to do that, but we do need to work more diligently at it and consistently at it. And it's tough. It's a fine line. So what advice would you give to coaches and trainers and athletes to maintain a healthy balance and avoid harming performance athletes while maintaining rigor and making progress and all the things that we want as an athlete?
Right. So I would say creative choreography is great. If you're really, really pushing the limits, ideally you're talking to, if you're at a high level company, hopefully you have a physical therapist or an athletic trainer or somebody who's on staff that can let you know, hey, that's probably most all dancers are going to get injured doing those particular steps. I went to a performance once. I won't name the company, but I went with the medical team for the company and I sat with them and I got to go backstage. It was awesome. Most everyone that this ballet was staged on was not in the performance because they got injured in the process. And so afterwards, it was great. We got to go backstage and there's all these people on crutches and in a boot. And these are the people that the ballet was originally set on, but they could not, you want to peak at your performance, right? You don't want to be peaking before then. You want to make it to the performance. So that's the first thing that I would say. If you are a choreographer, if you are an artistic director, have everybody working as a team, really communicate amongst all of the different parties so that everyone feels like they're doing their best to support the dancers. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is, you're right about the numbers. So this is going to be, a little like pie in the sky, but working with a dance medicine professional whenever possible. And we know there's multiple different ways you can find one, but oftentimes they might not have paid to join, a different organization. So you can ask in, dancer Facebook groups or Facebook groups for dance parents and things like that. Ask around and find a physical therapist who is really great at working with dancers and understands the demands on the dancer body, and start working with them before you need them. So they know what your body is like, so that they, them, you have a trusting relationship. And then if you do get an injury, you can hop in a lot easier.
I am going to say this again. I feel like I'm now saying this every show, but I feel like it's that important. It's like, if you're a dance studio owner or director, compile those resources, get to know the medical providers in your area, which ones are certified and able to teach or to treat dancers and make sure that they're able to diagnose dancers properly, and compile that list of resources for your parents, because it's not if, it's when they need it.
Correct.
They'll have, mindset resources and mental health resources and nutrition and PT and MDs and all the things that you need to be able to go, here, let's get you looked at.
Yep.
And with some sort of confidence that you are recommending them to somebody who they're going to be in good hands. And that's important. Otherwise they're just going to go, just pick one on a map, and that's not always a good result. So,
right.
But I do think that studio owners should do that and make sure that they have that available, especially if you have a highly competitive program.
I think they should do that. And another thing that I didn't mention, but I really would like to see studio owners do this, start looking for patterns. If you start to see more hip injuries, because I've heard from my physical therapy colleagues, I have heard them say, I get a lot of dancers from like this one studio that have the same injury. So if you are starting to see the same injury in, the dancers will get injured, no doubt about it. But if you're starting to see the same injury, then you really, want to be thinking about, what are we doing? What are we doing differently? What did we change that now suddenly we're seeing this?
Yeah.
We ask a lot of dance educators, so I'm not asking them to be, a dance medicine professional, right, but maybe consult with one, maybe ask to talk to some of the dancers when they do go to physical therapy, ask to talk to the physical therapist, have them sign off that they can speak with you. And then, you can maybe, even if they've signed off on several different people, you can say, hey, do you have any insights?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard because that requires a check of our ego, right? That makes us really have to take a hard look at ourselves and go, wait, we're contributing to this problem and we don't want anybody to know. So if you're somebody that's like, I don't want to, record my injuries because I don't really want to know and I don't really want to do what it's going to take to fix this, that is a much bigger problem, a different show. But you need to examine that and ask yourself some questions, because that is a very small thing that you could do to see the pattern, and something very easily fixable to identify a behavior that could be contributing to that. That's easily fixable, but it does require a hard look at ourselves, and that's not an easy thing to do. So
yes.
Yeah. I want to go to homework. Dr. Linda is always so wonderful every time she's here, and I could talk to her for hours, but I want to go to homework to make sure this is a fun part of our show. This is something, tangible that we give you every single week to kind of measure progress in all of the things that we talk about. And so, Linda, what is one thing you want to challenge our viewers and listeners, or whatever we want to call everybody out there, to make progress in this area between now and next Friday?
I want everyone to go to hypermobility.com/podcast or bendybodies.org and check out the Bendy Bodies podcast. The entire purpose of the podcast is to provide people with free, accessible information so that they can improve their mental health, their physical health. And many of the episodes are dedicated specifically to dancers. There are other episodes that are very specific to different medical topics. I know interestingly, the episode we have 2 episodes actually on neurodivergency. So like ADHD, autism, those are extremely popular. And there's a very high amount of overlap between joint hypermobility and conditions of neurodivergency. And so it's fascinating that those are the 2 most popular episodes, were interviews with Dr. Jessica Eccles. But I love getting feedback, and people could email me at info@bendybodies.org and let me know, hey, I don't see an episode on XYZ, could you discuss that in a future episode, and I'll add it to the list.
Yeah, it's always give the suggestions, because I know we're all in this podcast world of looking for content and answering questions that are relevant to what you all are wanting to know. So always share that with everybody that you're listening to, because we do really want to know. We always have, so you're going to check out the Bendy Bodies podcast from Dr. Linda Bluestein, and you're going to listen to it because it's amazing. You're also going to take the STEPS initiative course. It was the premise of this entire show. It is a free online course series, 5 modules curated by experts in each field. So again, racism, gender inequity, sex abuse and prevention, nutrition, psychology, dance, medicine, and science. We tackle all of that and are giving you a solid foundation so that you can build on that. It's a platform for you to get started. Take it with your staff, take it with your teachers, take it yourself, share it with your students. It is really just great information to have, because when you know better, you do better. Dr. Bluestein, I want to share these because you provided some really cool resources. So I'm going to go to part 1. No, never mind. Talk a little bit about what we're seeing here. I'm going to put part 1 and then part 2 on the screen, but tell a little bit about this.
Sure. So I started having problems when I was a teenager, and I was dancing, and like I said, that's all I wanted to do. But I started getting joint pain and migraines and gut problems, and I had terrible allergies and asthma and hives and eczema. Yeah, I had a lot of stuff, but nobody ever put it all together. I finally was diagnosed about a decade ago with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. But my rheumatologist, when he diagnosed me, he said, "But there's nothing you can do about it. So, go live your life." Well, that is a very hopeless feeling, right?
Sure.
And I didn't accept that for an answer. I was like, nope, I'm going to figure out how to make myself feel better. And so before I knew it, I was really just diving deep into not just the literature regarding that, but other similar conditions and what kind of things are helpful for that. Because since we don't have FDA approved treatments and we don't have a lot of research, we need to extrapolate from other conditions. So I started to realize that hope is one of the most important things that we can give people. And we want to empower dancers. We want to empower dancers to take control over their own lives and to, as early as possible, to take responsibility for their health. Because that's the other thing, is sometimes I'll be talking to somebody in their 20s and mom is answering all the questions. And it's like, I want to hear from you. I want you to be answering these questions.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I published with an incredible writing team. I published a 2-part series in a continuing medical education journal called Topics in Pain Management. We published a 2-part series titled Hope for Hypermobility, an integrative approach to treating symptomatic joint hypermobility. And it basically describes the approach that I take with my patients and my clients. And the difference there is, in order to become a patient, you have to travel to Wisconsin or Colorado and be seen in person for your first visit. Right. And then you have to be seen in person every year after, because that's where I'm licensed to practice medicine. If you can't do that, then I provide coaching online. And for example, I've seen people from Singapore and Korea and all kinds of different places. And I will then provide them with information that they can provide to their own medical staff. And I have so many people that they say they've gotten diagnosed that way, because I basically, I'm doing the other person's homework. Speaking of homework, sure. I'm doing their homework for them. So basically they're hiring me to, create this document, outline things, and I give them ideas of things that they can do at home. So
you're amazing.
You're amazing. And then we prioritize, like, what's important to you. Are the labels important, or do you want to just jump in and start doing some of these treatments and the labels are really not that important?
Yeah. Wow. You're amazing. And we're going to put these, we're going to try to put these links in the post as well, so that you all can download them, but they are available free for a limited time through June 15th. So you guys want to make sure you download these. And Linda has generously provided the links for us, but very, very valuable information. We have part 1 here, and then part 2. So we will make sure to link those in the post as well. And then Linda, I know you mentioned your email, but how can people get in touch with you?
So I am probably most active on Instagram as at HypermobilityMD, but I'm also at HypermobilityMD on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and I think Pinterest. I think that's all of them. And then Bendy_bodies on Instagram. But also there's a Bendy Bodies podcast account on Facebook, I believe is the only other one that's really very active. And also people could email me at info@bendybodies.org. I love getting feedback, questions, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, your Instagram account is just a wealth of knowledge too. Like, I mean, I love
Thank
your
you.
all the stuff you publish on there, and it's very helpful, very informative. So I encourage all of you to take a look. Linda, thank you so much for everything, for being here. I've enjoyed this so much, and I know that when we do season 4, we're going to have you back and lots of conversations next season too.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. That'll be great. And thank you so
Yeah.
much for having me and for all the incredible work that you do.
Oh my goodness, it's a wild ride, that's for sure. But thank goodness we're all doing it together. I know there's a group of people out there in the dance medicine community that are just really working so hard to bring all of this information to the forefront. It's all up to you out there to pay attention to it. So make sure you are doing that and consuming the right content. This is important, and it is going to improve dancer health if we just listen and pay attention. So thank you again to Dr. Linda Bluestein. We are working to turn Beyond the Steps into a podcast later this summer, so stay tuned for that. We're also planning for season 4. If you have any guests or topics that you want to see in season 4, message us at info@apolloperformance.com. We would love to hear from you. And please share this episode. Join our community. Make sure you're following and liking and sharing and subscribing on all the platforms with Apollo Performance and Turning Point Dance Creations, because it really helps us get the word out there. You have your homework from Dr. Bluestein. Next week, we're going to be talking to Ashley Mowry about values and why they're important and how to set them for yourself and your students. So join us next week. Until then, we hope you continue your journey beyond the steps. Everybody have a wonderful weekend. Do your homework, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much.